In theaters now from IFC Films and Shudder is the new art house slasher throwback In a Violent Nature from director Chris Nash, who gave us a segment of the ABCs of Death 2 and mostly a lot of short films, and we'll get back to that. So what is this film? This film is really boring. This is my opinion. I know people who really enjoyed this film, but my God, this is okay. I'll tell you what this is, because I think a lot of people who went to see this in the screening that I went to did not get what they were expecting. And I think going to the movies with sometimes being totally surprised is great, and sometimes it's better to be a well-informed consumer, which is honestly really the largest part of why I do this. It's to just let people know what they're going to get in the theater. Sometimes you get exactly what you think you are, and sometimes you don't, and sometimes not getting what you think you're getting is a surprise, and sometimes it just makes you kind of angry. And that was the case for me with In a Violent Nature. So basically this film is like if somebody wanted to make a Friday the 13th movie now, but you couldn't get the rights to Jason and you couldn't get the rights to the hockey mask or the Crystal Lake, but you still kind of wanted to make a Friday the 13th Jason movie, that's what this is. But this film stays with the murderer. So the conceit of this is that you're not seeing the usual presentation of a slasher camp killer in the woods movie where you're with the characters who are about to be victims and you get to know them, and once in a while this mysterious who is this and why killer pops up and does bad things to them. This is the opposite of that. You are with the murderer the whole time, while the murderer, who doesn't speak, is big hulking, it's just think Jason, because that's pretty much what this is. The murderer just walks through the woods in real time. There's a tremendous amount of the camera just, you're looking at the back of the head, the back head, shoulders, the back of the killer as they walk through the woods, and the rhythm of them just walking through the woods. And occasionally you'll hear in the distance, only twice do they sort of break this rule, where it cuts to I say potential. It's a slasher movie, you know they're going to be victims. It cuts to the pre-victims sitting around a campfire being dumb and annoying and typical of this kind of film. And I think that was done because the filmmakers felt it was necessary. Like, you have to somehow get to know these people, because if we don't, it's just this guy coming up on random people, murdering them, and then more walking in the woods. And it was just so boring. It was so boring. And typical of most post 80s or mid 80s slasher films, you don't care about the characters. You don't get to know the characters. The characters are just annoying. They're the kind of characters when I see in a slasher movie, I'm like, so these people are all going to die, right? How soon do we see these people die? And there are good guys here and there. What this movie, I'm seeing a lot of reaction to this movie. Some people feel like me, where it's just like, this was extremely boring. Almost nothing happens. It's endless shots of the back of this person walking through the woods, which look lovely, and the occasional very gory kill. Now, yes, it is practical effects. Yes, some of the kills are very gory. A couple are totally thrown away, and they're shot in such a way where you're like, okay, I guess that happened, but I didn't really. And it's not the usual shaky thing. Like, there's one that's done like at a very long distance, and there's a lot of long takes. This movie reminded me of David Lynch's Twin Peaks: The Return, which I said about that at the time. It's like the only things that were ever edited out of any shot in that show were the moments when you heard Lynch say action and cut, and otherwise everything went as slow and as long as possible. That's what this movie feels like. A lot of times it's presented in a way, again, it's not the shaky garbage that I hate. It's just dull. It's very boringly shot. I get what they were going for. I get that the idea of this is it's a slasher movie, but you're always with the killer, and you get to see what the killer's downtime is like, and you get to see what happens between the kills and all that. And it's marginally interesting, but it would have worked better as a short. And when I look at the filmography of the director, I see that he has mostly done shorts, and this really feels like I was thinking to myself at one point, there's this incredibly long sequence of the killer walking through the woods, and you're literally, it's not like it's interesting, like it's different camera angles. You are floating behind the killer, looking at them from behind as they just trudge through the woods for a really, in terms of cinematic time and language, a really long time. And my thought looking at that was like, okay, they shot a whole bunch of footage of this person walking, thinking, well, we're going to cut it down to what we need later. And in the case of this film, they just used the whole thing. And that's what it feels like. It's like you could so tighten this up. And it's not like I have a short attention span or anything. I just feel like if I'm sitting in a theater watching something, it's got to be interesting. And this was so not interesting. It had moments that were funny, and it had moments where the kills were really well done, but I need more than that. And I know for some slasher fans, or for some horror fans, it's all about the kills, and whatever is between the kills can be, in the case of this movie, a whole lot of nothing, and that's fine. But it was just, I was just like, I just wanted it to be over. I just wanted it to be over. This is in theaters. I always say everything is better in the theater. With the right crowd, this might be great. And again, some people really love this, so just take it as your mileage may vary on this. But so many shots just going on forever. And sometimes it's effective, and sometimes it's just like, oh my God, do something. Please get on with it. It is sponsored by Shudder, co-produced by Shudder, co-presented by Shudder, so that means it will be on the Shudder streaming service. I'm not going to say that my recommendation is to wait for Shudder, because I don't believe in that. I think everything should be seen in the theater. Everything is better in the theater. But another thing, shot 4:3, shot square. I get really annoyed when I see movies that are shot square now. And I know it's an artistic choice, and people can shoot movies triangular if they want to. They can shoot it any amount of widescreen. And I get it if you're trying to recreate or emulate an era when movies were shot that way. The movie The Artist was shot that way. It was emulating silent film. And I don't want to lay any history on anybody that doesn't know it, but movies were essentially square for the first many, many years of their existence. And it wasn't really until like I believe the 50s, when you had the CinemaScope and the widescreen formats coming in, that the screen kind of widened out. And TVs were square for many, many years. So I get occasionally why a filmmaker shoots something square, but it just annoys me because screens aren't shaped that way anymore. If you're trying to emulate a movie from the 40s, that makes sense. If you're trying to emulate home video, that makes sense. But if you're emulating the slasher movies of the 80s, none of those were shot square. You might have watched them at home on a videotape on a square TV. I get that. But the filmmakers didn't want it to be square. They didn't want those movies to be seen square. They wanted them to be 185, 235, whatever, however they shot them. So when I see a movie that's square in the theaters now, it just comes off as pretentious to me. It comes off as being particular, and I'm being quirky, and I'm shooting this square. I don't know why it was shot square. It didn't make any sense. I'm watching it in the theater, so half the screen, and now I sound like the people who hated letterboxing and that drove me crazy. But to me, it's like, if you're going to watch it in the theater screens are not square. If you're going to watch it at home on TV now, TVs are not square. If your end goal is to get this put onto a VHS tape for people to watch on old CRT TVs to try to feel like they're watching an old Friday the 13th movie, I guess I get that. But at the same time, this isn't one of those movies. It doesn't feel like one of those movies beyond the kill scenes, which are gorier than the old scenes back then. But boy. Anyway, if you're interested in seeing In a Violent Nature, I strongly advise seeing it in the theater, just because theaters need all the help they can get. I want theaters to survive. I want to be able to keep seeing movies in the theater, and the experience of seeing a movie with a crowd, even something like this, where during the kill scenes people laugh or they giggle or they squirm or they shriek, that makes it a better experience. And even at the end, when the lights come up and everybody's looking at each other going, what did I just see? And I'm hearing all the people going, I thought it was supposed to be... Everything's better in a theater. Anyway, in theaters now from IFC Films and Shudder is In a Violent Nature.